year ago today, I was alone, isolated from people that I thought cared about me, and the most hurt I've ever been as a Christian. Truthfully, I came very close to giving up my faith, my calling, and ministry. Let's talk about why I didn't. Hi, everyone. My name is Andrew Geist. Welcome to Anything Goes, A Journey Home podcast. I'm just so glad that you're here with me today. A year ago today, I was a few months removed from being told I was being let go of my previous job as a worship pastor. Because I'm not about gossip, the simple facts are everyone involved failed miserably, myself included. Unfortunately, the results of all the failings was my dismissal with a 9-month window to find a new job. Now, I'm sure you're wondering, why was that so long? Well, truthfully, I don't know. Maybe it was to keep me on the hook until they found my replacement, or perhaps it was just generosity to me and my time of service and giving me the opportunity and plenty of time to find a new job, which I did. Unfortunately, though, this didn't change the pain that I felt. As is often the case with these kinds of transitions, it's the business of church to keep things under wraps until there is a safe and healthy looking transition that can take place for the person who's being dismissed. This meant I was prohibited from talking to anyone on staff or outside of the church about my transition, and I have continued to do so. I was graciously given the opportunity to share with two individuals, however, and I also chose of my own volition to, and at my own discretion, to share with somebody in my life because of the nature of our relationship at the time. Unfortunately, though, my transition was not easy. I had a difficult time finding work. Despite working for a 600-person church and managing a 30-plus member musician worship department comprised of volunteers and paid musicians, I still wasn't able to find a job, mostly because my leadership was unwilling to be honest about why I was being let go and still keeping me on staff while letting me go. It made my character look quite questionable at best. The facts were, at this stage in our relationship, the leadership of the church didn't trust me, and truthfully, I was struggling to trust the leadership of my church. We both failed relationally. Narcissism, pride, and arrogance ran rampant through my work environment. There were many toxic situations and people and situations that I found myself on a regular basis, both in leadership and in the culture of the church. And I became embroiled in this kind of culture. I even found myself conducting myself in a similar manner, which I found disappointing, morally sketchy at best, and honestly corrupting my personal and Christian character as a leader. All of this resulted in, at the end of it all, feelings of isolation, betrayal, anger, and brokenness, and obviously no job. It yielded scenarios I would never want to play out again in any situation, beginning with being required to go through a farced reconciliation meeting in which I was steamrolled and gaslit. I had made multiple private attempts to apologize for my part in the dissolution of our relationship, but absolutely none of my efforts were met or acknowledged, nor were my efforts to own my mistakes met with any kind of forgiveness, unfortunately. Instead, I was told in not so many words that this was the best thing that could have happened to me. No forgiveness was given, i.e., the words, "I forgive you, Andrew," for blank. No reconciliation was pursued, i.e., an equitable work towards rebuilding trust and relationship. Now, of course, this is the nature of a business. This is the nature of the business world, and I'm totally fine with it. Although, regrettably, while reconciliation is not something we're biblically required to do or commanded to do, it is something that is a cry of my heart. And as I struggled, feeling very sad and very angry because of this experience, I continued to struggle to find work and get into the application process successfully. Despite having many churches contacting me and wanting to start a conversation, none were truly gaining traction. Throughout this whole process, at the point at which I was really struggling to find a job to provide for my family, I reached my breaking point. I wanted to give up my ministry. I wanted to give up my calling. I wanted to give up my faith. I wanted to give up church altogether. The really painful reality I faced, unbeknownst to anyone in my previous church culture or church leadership, the hurt that was caused to me because of the decisions made and the failings on both ends resulted in my wife, by extension, feeling the same pain. She too wanted to give up church. She too wanted to give up her relationship with God, and she too wanted to walk away from ministry altogether. And then my extended family became even more embittered towards the idea of church and the people who reside in those churches and being a part of those bodies. But as I said in my intro, I didn't give up on my faith, and I didn't give up on my calling either. Now you may be wondering, why? Why didn't I give up after all this pain and misery that I went through being in church, being around Christian people, and going through this painful experience that inevitably caused my wife and my extended family pain? Why didn't I give it all up? Well, for your information, the restoration of my faith didn't come by thanks of my previous church's eldership, senior pastor, or anyone else. It was God, 100% God. His word came alive by way of relationships outside of my previous church. In the lowliest and most humble of conversations and places, his word revealed itself to me. 1 Peter 5, 6 through 7. Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that at proper time he may exalt you, casting all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. The reality that I learned over the course of that through this verse is that I was dealing with a lot of pride in my own heart, a lot of arrogance in my own heart, and I was dealing with a lot of pride and arrogance on the other side of the table from all the hurt and pain that was being caused to me. And the truth is I was dealing with the narcissism that popped up in my own personal life and in the culture of the church that I was serving. And when you're in that kind of environment, the humility that is required of us may be divine in nature. Might be not yelling at those involved in letting me know I was being let go the week before my youngest daughter was born. I wanted to yell so much, but I didn't. That took God's intervention. Throughout the course of the whole transition, not gossiping, and still to this day, not gossiping about my previous leadership, but also being true to the testimony of what happened to me and being honest about what has happened to me since then, when appropriate, as it applies to my journey as a Christian, as I'm doing right now. But similarly, being willing to seek help, to be humble enough to seek advice during the transition from people that I trusted and had proven themselves to be trustworthy in my life, knowing that I would not receive any judgment or condemnations for my own personal failings as a leader. And incredibly, these amazing people didn't judge me. Another way I found healing and restoration in my faith and my calling and my ministry was through my relationship with my wife, allowing her to be a part of the process of healing for myself, helping her to see that we're a team and we are part of this together, and that we could find healing and health and wholeness someplace else, which we found in our new church home. And the truth is, if it wasn't for the experience I gained from working in an unhealthy culture, under toxic leadership and toxic culture, I wouldn't have known what a healthy church culture looks like. I wouldn't now have the courage to stand against sinful behaviors in leadership. I would not have the courage to speak up against bad character and bad decisions when it corrupts good Christian morals. So for that, my previous church, its leaders, and culture has my gratitude. And please keep in mind that since leaving, the church has changed by way of staff, and I pray daily that the culture is getting healthier and the church leaders are as well. But while I'm hopeful this is the case, I am skeptical, as behavior patterns when it comes to pride and arrogance always have a way of repeating themselves, it would seem. And finally, one of the major ways that I found healing and restoration in my life was through my pursuit of my physical health, my spiritual health, and my mental health. Some of the ways that I did this was through working out, through prayer, reading God's word, and meditating on God's word on a daily, sometimes hour by hour, minute by minute basis. The truth is, nothing changed for me more than the day I lost my first 5 pounds after learning I was losing my job. Even more comforting for me was me not gaining any of that weight back when we went through the difficult process of moving 4 states east from where we were previously. And I quickly learned that my relationship with God was not dependent on what church I was a part of. I want to be clear, being a part of church body, especially a local church body, is so important to our Christian walk. But at some point and at certain points in our lives, whether we are in ministry or we're not in ministry, sometimes in seasons, we are called to move away from and move to another culture for whatever the reason might be. It could be a healthy reason. It could be a process of maturation. Maybe we've matured beyond what the 4 walls of the church we're in now can offer us, and so we need to move on. Maybe we are moving into a place where we need more emotional health in our lives, so we move to a more emotionally healthy church culture. Maybe we move into a church culture that is more intellectually healthy, that helps us to think about God's word more. But the reality is that our relationship with God and its success or failure is not actually dependent upon the church, but it is dependent upon our willingness to participate in that relationship. And for me, the wake-up call was I was not in God's word as much as I claimed to be. I was not praying as much as I claimed to be, especially in a season of my life where God wanted to come through and teach me what it means to be humble. So I prayed every day. I pulled out a journal and I wrote out my feelings. I went through things like the feelings wheel. I went through things like a practice of identifying when I'm on a peace cycle, emotionally speaking, or when I am on a fear cycle, emotionally. I learned what it means to create inventories, to identify and recognize the things that were my responsibility and the things that were not my responsibility, and that I could write on my sheet, not guilty. This has transformed my life, and it has set me up for such success in my new and current church home beyond what I could possibly imagine. It's created disciplines in me that I never thought would be a reality, and now they are. It's truly incredible. And so I don't know if you're in a transition or not. Maybe you are. But the reality is that regardless of the transition, the question is, are you going to be humble enough to let God divinely intervene in your situation? 1 Peter 5:6-7 again says, "Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand, so that at the proper time he may exalt you, casting all your anxiety on him because he cares for you." And I want to help you understand the humility you're going through right now is only for now. Because God's word says in that verse that at the proper time, not our time, not our vision of this time or how this process is going to go, but his time. And he's going to exalt you. He's going to lift you up above it all. And it's going to be incredible and it's going to be amazing. And you are going to be so far blessed beyond what you could possibly imagine. And then while you're going through it, don't ever forget that God cares for you. All these things that you're anxious about. Will I find a new job? Will I have a place to live? Will I be able to provide food for my family? Will I be able to provide for the basic medical needs of my family? Casting those anxieties and cares upon God because he cares for you. He cares for you, folks. He loves you. He wants to be there with you through this process. It just requires you being willing to be humble. And you might ask yourself, how humble is humble enough? Jesus. Jesus is our example of humility. He suffered the most humbling experience any one of us could ever hope or imagine. He died on a cross publicly, and he was broken, and he was whipped, and he died there. So at a minimum, we would be willing to die in humiliation for Jesus Christ. And at the maximum, we're being asked to suffer just a public embarrassment, a willingness to say, you know what? We messed up. We've made mistakes. We thought we were doing God's will. We thought we were on the right path, but we messed up. We've hurt a lot of people along the way. But God is still God, and we want to do his will. And the same is true for church culture. That should be the church culture's response when things don't go well. That should be the response of church leadership when things don't go well, is a willingness to be humble enough to say, I'm willing to suffer embarrassment for Jesus Christ and acknowledge that I've messed up, that I've failed, that I haven't quite got things right, that I've turned over a ton of staff, or that I have forgotten about reaching the lost, or that I have forgotten about ministering to the needs of the poor and the widowed and the orphans. I have failed in these ways, but I need your help. I am coming before you humbly to say, I need your help, congregation. I need your help, church leaders, to come alongside me and make this happen, to make this change. It's not easy being humble, speaking from experience. Allowing people to say and talk and speculate so much about my transition, none of which was true, none of which was accurate to what has been perceived about my transition. That was truly humbling. Not being able to stand up and defend myself when I felt I should have. That was humbling. Not retaliating. That was humbling. Not going after justice because I'm right. I'm biblically right. This person's biblically wrong. That took great humility for me to set down my pride and say, you know what? Okay, these are the circumstances I find myself in. I've failed. I've broken this relationship, as have other people in this relationship, and it's time for me to move on. Would I have loved to pass on the torch? Of course. Would I have loved to walk out with my head held high? Of course. Unfortunately, that was not God's plan. I had to leave with a whisper, and that was what God wanted. And I hope those in my previous church, if they listen to this episode, I hope they know that I love them. I miss them dearly. I pray for them every day. I pray for the church, and I pray that God continues to use it in mighty ways all throughout where they are serving and where they're ministering to. And God is just so good to me and my family. By means of this transition, God provided a home for us here in our new place where we're serving. And God has provided me a new team to be a part of, and a new culture and a new congregation to minister to. And I'm just so grateful that God is still using me. And that was the truly humbling reality, was that I would be so prideful and arrogant to think that because I'm losing this job, God must be done with me. How foolish of me to think that if I was to lose a job or a position or a title at a church, that God would possibly be done with me, and that God possibly couldn't use me anywhere else because this is it. This is the job. Or this, I know I can't possibly get anything better anywhere else, so I have to be here. God has so much good for us if we are willing to be humble and be obedient to his call. And even when things are tough, even when things are hard, even when things are difficult and challenging, and we are being humiliated and we are being denigrated and we are being despised by the world, that we would be humble and be obedient and trust that at his time, he's going to lift us up and he's going to honor us because we have cast all of our fears, worries, and anxieties on him, knowing that he cares for us and he's going to see us through. I want you to do something for me. Are you like me at one point in a transition of ministry? Is it painful? Are you struggling to trust God? Are you struggling to be humble? If so, reach out to me. If you need someone to share your story with, I am here for you. Reach out to me on my website, aguysproduction.com, or go to the poll below and answer yes or no. And I'll reach out to you, and I'd be happy to let you know how you can get in contact with me, because I want to make myself available to help or coach or encourage or equip you to experience God's divine intervention in your difficult situations. So let's do something. Reach out to me. Thanks for listening to the podcast today or watching online. Thank you for liking, sharing, and subscribing to this podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to click the bell so you can get the update on every time I take a journey home. Or follow this podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify so that you also get notified anytime I'm on my way home. You can also go to aguysproduction.com to connect with me there, or you can find all of the episodes of this season and previous seasons at ajourneyhome.blog. All of the socials are linked in the show notes below and on YouTube. Be kind to each other, show faith, love, and hope to those who need it. Have a great week. I'm going home.